Election headquarters. This is Talking Points.
Well, when we're wrapping up the legislative session, I'm sure you're not shocked to see this person sitting next to me. We knew you'd be back.
Yeah.
Drew Landry, political analyst, among several other titles.
Sure.
But he's here today because we told you he would be. This is the end of the legislative session, an historic session.
That's right.
A kumbaya session? Can I call it that?
First, thanks for letting me be here. It's always fun to be on Talking Points. It was a kumbaya. It probably ended that way.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as this session was like a plane ride. Started out with a lot of turbulence.
Yeah.
With Lubbock's own Dustin Burrows becoming the House Speaker and all the drama that revolved around that, with the Lieutenant Governor making public statements about that. And then we were kind of thinking, is this going to be a bit of a rough go? Mm-hmm. Turns out that was things kind of smooth through the flight.
Yeah.
And while it's always natural for these two to have different opinions and different ideas as to what needs to really take place.
Yeah.
The plane ended. It came to a nice stop. It landed fine.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed what their particular politics are, you were like, hey, this was a good session.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It was an extremely conservative session, but that is to be expected when you have conservative leadership across the board, and also if the parents are getting along, which is the whole thing there.
Right.
I mean, the previous sessions, maybe a little bit less was accomplished for the Republican agenda because people who maybe didn't see eye to eye were a little bit more contentious about it, and that just wasn't the case this time around.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. It just seemed like that the tension that existed with Lieutenant Governor and past House Speakers, and particularly with Dade Phelan and Joe Strauss, wasn't here this time.
Yeah.
Speaker Burrows, before he became Speaker, was always in the room to talk with the Lieutenant Governor and to negotiate with the Lieutenant Governor. And so there was this rapport that these two had that they could really rely on. But the one thing that made me really bring up my eyebrow and wonder if this was going to go the way of Dade Phelan was when Lieutenant Governor Patrick, not only at the beginning was throwing bombs and saying terrible things and really trying to undercut Speaker Burrows' time as House Speaker, but also there was a moment there where in the middle of the session he says it's time for the House to take up these particular things, to take up these issues. That's where you're the Lieutenant Governor, and that's where you get the criticism of that you want to run the entire legislature.
Yeah.
The House operates different than the Senate, so that's been a constant frustration for the Lieutenant Governor, and the House Speaker had to be there to kind of say we're different.
Yeah, and the Speaker protects the House a little bit. It seemed like that was a duty that Speaker Burrows really did take seriously this time around. Let's talk a little bit about, we started this session with a bit of a chasm in Republican thinking. Who's more Republican versus who's going to get something done, and how do we rectify those if they are different? Then the House sails into this session with all of a sudden some bipartisan support of a speaker. But then the school choice movement happens, that vote happens, and the referendum is turned down. It looks like the Dems have a slight power in that they say no more constitutional amendments. As a Democrat at the end of the session, then what are they thinking going into maybe another re-election campaign by Speaker Burrows, who, by the way, has not said anything about that. But you would assume that maybe he would want a second term.
Sure.
What is a Democrat thinking now?
Looking at where they were at this session, it was very much the mindset that they would have a seat at the table. And I've been, in my own way, I've been critical of the way the Democrats have handled this because the chair, Jean Wu, was all about, well, we just need our voice. And it seemed like that they gave that away to be at the kids' table as opposed to being at the grown-ups' table. All that they really got out of all that was that they weren't be able to chair anything, but their leadership spots were being funded at the committee level.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, that was like, oh, well, we got this thing. Well, you gave away a lot of the other stuff. So they started out in a, really behind the 8 ball. Yeah, they got to be heard. Yeah, they got a seat at the table. They got their voices heard. But when it came to voting, they lost on almost everything.
Yeah.
There was a few things that they're able to really water down, and to try to make it what in their view now not so bad. But when it comes to the big agenda, I think they kind of knew that the writing was on the wall, that they weren't really going to get anything.
Well, and realistically, did we all see that?
Yeah.
Because it's this is a very red state. I don't
Yep.
have to say that out
Sure.
loud.
Yeah.
But it's a particularly coming after the election in November, a huge red wave across the nation. We saw that reflected in Texas, in the legislature as well. But there were still times, it was only 88 Republicans. So in a time when we needed to see 100 people on one side or the other, a Republican would need to reach across the aisle to get at least 12 of their Democrat friends to be a part of that.
That's right. That's right. So when, going back to that point, and that's a very good point, was that they said, okay, you're going to do this, we get no referendum, there's not going to be any more constitutional amendments. The Republicans forced their hand on some things that even Democrats would agree with, where it would be property tax relief, other types of bail type things that they say, well, it's really tough for us to be against this sort of thing. So they weren't holding the line on everything, but there were several things, even the water project, that is a big deal for State Senator Perry. That's going to be brought to the voters.
Yeah.
But as far as other things that the Republicans really wanted voters to really decide on, that didn't happen. And so they kind of held true to that, but then when they were put in a position to look good or look bad, they made that conscientious choice.
Yeah, they definitely did.
Yeah.
You mentioned Senator Perry. He had a lot of big bills this session.
Yeah.
He was in the name of every politics reporter across the state. You couldn't ignore what he was doing.
Yeah.
A lot of it was the water bill. I call him the water czar when he sits in that chair, and I think he earns that title here.
Sure.
Another big bill that he carried that is still hanging in the balance is that THC ban.
That's right.
What do you think about that? Governor Abbott has been radio silent about this. It's huge too.
That's a really good point. Let's understand that water is a nonpartisan issue.
Yeah, we have to have it at the end.
Exactly. We really need to have water in here, and so that whole reform and the whole redoing of it, that's great. But when it came to the THC thing, that you're getting into even some conservative mindsets to say that's my business, and so there's this little conflict within the conservative movement regulating. Are we going to regulate business? Are you going to let it business be had, or are we going to preserve these traditional values that are well with there? Those two things really collided here. What will Governor Abbott do? Well, he's got to make a choice here by the end of the month, or else it's automatically going to become law. Veterans are saying to veto this. You have others who say he needs to sign it. What ended up happening was there was an interesting compromise where they're going to ban edible THC, and they're going to expand the compassionate use aspect to where those with chronic illnesses can use THC. Doesn't really seem like that's entirely what the senator wants or what all of those in the social conservative movement may want, but that may be all that they can get for this session. Of course, let's understand there'll be another one coming in 2027. Maybe they can make reforms to this particular thing then, provided if that same legislature is there. So it'll be interesting to see what the governor does. Veterans are a big part of his voting bloc. And these veterans who put their lives on the line to defend our country, coming back with PTSD, finding that this is something that's helpful to them, that's really speaking to a whole different conversation about where does the governor lie on this. And he has been, you're right, he has been very radio silent. Really ever since the whole voucher bill, the school choice bill really came into play, he's been nowhere. And he's got to make some sort of a choice here come the end of the month.
I'm really curious to see how that goes, because there are people on both sides of the aisle who have strong opinions on an entire spectrum on
Yes.
this. So I know that the intention behind the ban, when we spoke with State Senator Perry, was because it was intended as an ag bill in the beginning in 2019. He famously made a statement when he was talking to the committee that, I warned you guys not to be cute about this, and he's talking about the Delta 8 stuff. It really just like a disappointed dad sort of vibe there. And so there was a talk of regulation versus banning. State Senator Perry said, well, why would you regulate something when it's clearly not working out? I don't know that there was something like this anticipated, where it was our veterans are involved and our businesses are involved and our economies are involved, things like that. So this is going to be interesting. How do you rectify that as a Republican? The veterans versus your morals.
Exactly. That's a really good question. State representative who chaired the State Affairs Committee, Ken King, out of the Panhandle. He was the one who kind of took this up on the House side and said, maybe a total ban is not exactly what we want. He took a lot of heat from the social conservative movement in his party, saying that's, what are you doing? You're watering this down. Are you wanting to, said all the rhetoric things. But
Devil's lettuce.
Exactly, and he held that. I mean, he didn't really lash out. That's not really Ken King's personality to do that in a public way. But it'll be interesting to see here as they come back from the session. They come home. They go back to their districts. Will State Senator Perry and Ken King go to their areas, because there are parts of the district of Ken King's area that overlaps with Senator Perry's area. So Hockley County, that western portion down in Gaines County, what will they say? What will their conversations be like when it comes down to this particular issue? That's a really good question there. How, if you're in the Republican side, how do you rectify that? I always like to think of it as, how much do you care about it? Is it a big issue to you? If it is, then you're one way or the other. If you're kind of like, I can compromise on this. That's kind of what we saw happening here. But that doesn't squash the entire firebrand that we see, and we know how State Senator Perry feels about it. We know how State Representative Ken King feels about it. We'll see how this plays out here in the next year or so.
It makes me excited for 2027. Is that crazy to even say? Like, those numbers together are like, wow, I'm living in the Jetsons' future. That's so far away.
Where's my jetpack?
Right, literally. But it turns out it's not actually that far away. But look in your crystal ball for just a moment for me. Midterm elections also include all of our Texas representatives. They also include several senators this time around, state senators. Everyone, of course, is watching this Cornyn and Paxton thing, and we will have you on to talk about that, because we can fill up, hours with discussion on that. But I think, personally, I'm really excited about watching these state representative races, because I think that's going to much more reflect how this legislative session went. How do you think that's going to go? Is there much change there, or, does this feel like it can rest?
Great question here. The way that I look at this is the way that we really need to examine elections by and large, is everything kind of trickles down from the federal area down into the states.
Definitely.
So to say this, I hate doing this, but it's really the truth, is to nationalize. And so if the president's approval ratings are not high, if the economy hasn't taken off, if the tariffs are a drag, if all these ifs are happening, if the big beautiful bill isn't as beautiful as we're being sold, that can come back and bite the Republicans and really hurt their ability to hold on to all seats in Congress. Will that seep down into state races, even county races? The answer is yes, but how far down will it go? Will that hurt people in this area? Well, look, my gut answer is to say no. But what we have to remember is, by the time people are voting in 2026, odds are, more than they're not, that they will forget what happened in 2025.
That's accurate.
And so it's up to those who are campaigning
Yeah.
to remind everybody what they did and to talk about the session and to campaign on whatever that the issue was. So that's for 2026. And the federal national politics, they get the big headlines. And if people are anti the president, as they usually are in midterm elections, that's going to not play well for his party. So just these are a lot of ifs, and that's what my crystal ball really says here.
Yeah.
Is that if things continue the way that they are, if the president's approval rating doesn't improve, if the big beautiful bill, and if there's cuts to Medicare and the Medicaid cuts aren't playing out, that's going to be a very bad year for the Republicans come 2026. It's possible that there are some seats in the Texas House that are in play. Texas Senate is kind of, there may be one or two that might be up there, but
Yeah.
that really depends on retirements and who's seeking something else and
Yep.
all that. But the Texas House seems to, there might be maybe 8 or 9 seats that you can look at that might be in play because of what's happening at the upper, federal level. So, will the Texas House still be 88 to 62, 88 Republicans, 62 Democrats? Last time the president had a midterm was in 2018, and the Republicans lost 12 seats in the House.
Wow.
Will that repeat again? Well, the only thing I can say, which drives everyone crazy, is we'll have to wait and find out.
Yeah, which means
It's possible.
It means that you'll have to be back.
Yeah.
Is the answer to that.
Yeah.
That's how we have to end
I like
all
that,
of
yeah,
these.
yeah,
because we have to watch, and this is the statistics side of me is looking at past, and my crystal ball looks
Yeah.
backwards sometimes, and I
Sure.
think that's how you have to do that. But
That's right.
very curious to see how this
Yeah.
plays out now
Right.
that our people are coming back to district, and
Yeah.
hopefully we get to hear from them personally again and have them on this desk and ask them these questions
Yeah.
too. But that'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely. One last thing is we can talk more about this about Paxton and Cornyn, but
Oh, yeah.
Democrats want Paxton.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They want him to be the nominee.
Huh.
And truth to be told, be careful what you wish for. But let's also know this: Paxton carries baggage, and can those Cornyn voters get behind somebody like him, or just stay home? Of course, that's just a small preview with that. But,
Oh, yeah.
But that's kind of the feeling, is that Democrats want Ken Paxton to be the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate.
There's more fodder for debate
Yep.
with that one for sure.
Absolutely.
I am drooling over this race, so I already can't wait for it.
I
But
know. I got my popcorn.
yeah, every time I'm gonna have a popcorn machine right here next time you're
I like
here,
it.
because we gotta pop some more. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Always good to see you.